"Back off," he said, and his voice didn't shake. Not even a little. 4 of them, one of him in a tire iron he'd been carrying for 3 blocks. The biker on the ground had blood on his jacket, and nobody, not one person in that crowd had moved. Ethan Walker was 18 years old, and he had exactly 6 seconds to decide what kind of man he was going to be. If this story already has your heart pounding, hit that subscribe button right now and drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. Stay with me all the way to the end, because what happens next will genuinely surprise you. The shift had run long. It always did on Thursdays. Ethan Walker wiped the last of the grease from his knuckles with a shop rag that had seen better days and punched out at 9:47 p.m., which was 47 minutes past, when Ramon Castillo had told him to leave, and about 3 hours passed when his body had started asking him serious questions about his life choices. His boots were worn at the heel. His gray t-shirt had a burn mark on the left sleeve from a spark he'd caught 2 weeks ago and hadn't had time to care about since. He was 18 years old, built lean, from the kind of work that doesn't happen in a gym, and he had a 40-minute walk home because the alternator on his truck was currently disassembled on Bay 3's workbench, waiting on a part that was supposed to arrive Tuesday and hadn't. It was a warm Arizona night, the kind where the heat comes up from the asphalt long after the sun is gone, and the air has that particular dry weight that settles on your shoulders like a hand. Ethan walked fast. Not nervous fast. Purposeful. He had a route he'd taken maybe 200 times down Garfield, cut through the alley behind the old Sunoco that had been shuttered since before he started high school, come out on Mesa Verde, and straight on home to the house on Pinon, where his mother was most likely already asleep with the TV on low and her medication on the nightstand, and where he would check on her, eat whatever was left in the refrigerator, and be out again by 6:15 the next morning. That was the plan. It was always the plan. Plans Ethan had learned were useful right up until they weren't. He heard it before he saw it. Sound carries differently in desert towns at night. There's less to absorb it, less traffic, less crowd noise, and voices cut through the open air with a clarity that can be startling. What he heard first was laughter, not the good kind, the kind that has a target, then a thud, then something that might have been a groan or might have been a word cut short. He stopped walking. There's a specific calculation that happens in a person's body before their mind fully catches up, a kind of inventory. The nervous system runs without asking permission. Heart rate, threat level, distance options. Ethan stood at the mouth of that alley for maybe 2 full seconds, which is longer than it sounds when you're doing that kind of math. And then he stepped forward because not stepping forward had never really been an option. His body was willing to consider. The tire iron was in his right hand. He'd been using it as a walking tool. He'd pulled it from the shop without thinking about it. Force of habit, something to have in his hand on the walk, the same way some people walk with keys between their fingers in a bad neighborhood. He wasn't thinking about it as a weapon until the moment he rounded the half-collapsed wooden fence at the alley's edge and took in what was in front of him. 4 of them. Young his age, maybe a year or 2 older. Hoodies despite the heat. 2 of them had their phones up recording. One of them was kicked back against the cinder block wall with his arms crossed, watching like a man at a sporting event. The 4th, the one doing the talking, was crouched down in front of a man on the ground, and the man on the ground was older, maybe 55, 60, wearing a leather vest thick with patches that Ethan couldn't fully read from this angle, but recognized the shape of, and his right hand was pressed flat against the asphalt like he was trying to push himself up and didn't have enough left to manage it. The biker had a cut above his eyebrow. The blood had made it down to his jaw. Beyond the 4 of them at the far end of the alley, 3 or 4 other people stood in a loose cluster. Bystanders. One of them had their phone up too. Nobody was moving toward the man on the ground. Nobody was saying anything. The one crouching in front of the biker was saying something low and mean, the kind of tone that doesn't need volume because it's not performing for an audience, it's performing for the victim. Ethan couldn't catch the exact words, but the shape of them was familiar enough. He'd heard that tone before. A boy had used it on him once in 7th grade, and he still remembered the specific cold, sick feeling of being the one on the receiving end of it. He walked forward, steady pace, not rushing. The one with his arms crossed against the wall saw him first. His posture changed, something tightening, something recalibrating. "Yo," he said, and the word was a warning to his crew. The crouching one stood up and turned around. He was a little taller than Ethan, broader in the chest, with the practiced easiness of someone who'd won enough confrontations that he'd stopped expecting to lose. He looked at Ethan, looked at the tire iron, and his mouth moved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Keep walking, bro," he said. Ethan didn't. He stopped about 8 feet away, which was close enough to be taken seriously and far enough to have options. He looked at the man on the ground. The biker looked back at him. His eyes were focused, alert. He wasn't out, he wasn't broken, he was just hurt and outnumbered and tired, and something in the way he looked at Ethan had a specific quality to it. Not hope exactly. More like the careful attention of a man who's been around long enough to know the difference between someone walking toward a situation and someone walking into one. "Back off," Ethan said. He said it once. Quiet, no performance to it. The tall one did a slow blink. Behind him, the two with the phones exchanged a look. The one against the wall pushed off it casual, like he was just adjusting his position, which was the oldest move in the book, and Ethan had already accounted for it. "You lost," the tall one said. "You need to keep walking, man. This doesn't have anything to do with you." "I'm making it my business," Ethan said. "He's done. Back off." The tall one laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, dismissive, and he half turned back toward the biker like he was going to demonstrate exactly how little Ethan's request mattered to him. That was when Ethan closed the distance. 6 seconds. People who analyze confrontations for a living will tell you that the average physical engagement that determines a winner is over in less than 10. Ethan wasn't thinking in seconds. He wasn't thinking much at all, operating in that narrow, functional space where training and instinct share the wheel. He didn't swing the tire iron. He didn't need to. What he did in a motion that was controlled and deliberate and over before the tall one had fully registered it was happening was step inside the guy's reach. Use his left forearm to redirect the reactive grab that came at him and bring the tire iron across flat side, not the end, against the outside of the tall one's knee. Not hard enough to break, hard enough to buckle. The tall one went down on one knee, and the sound he made was surprise more than anything else. Ethan stepped back, both hands visible, tire iron low at his side. He looked at the other three. He didn't say anything. He just let the moment breathe. The one against the wall had come forward 2 steps and stopped. The two with the phones had stopped recording. All 3 of them were doing the same calculation Ethan had done at the mouth of the alley inventory threat assessment options, and all 3 of them were arriving at an answer that involved the tall one kneeling on the ground and a quiet 18-year-old with the tire iron who had not flinched, had not yelled, and was looking at them now with an expression that was less aggression than it was plain statement of fact. "We're done here," Ethan said. "All of you." The tall one grabbed his own knee, sucked in a breath, and looked up at Ethan with an expression cycling fast through pain and anger, and something that sat just underneath both of them. Something younger, something that looked a lot like the sudden unwelcome recognition that he had miscalculated. "You're dead," he said. The words were obligatory. The conviction was missing. "You're standing up and walking away," Ethan said. He said it the same way he'd said everything else. Same volume, same face. The one against the wall grabbed the tall one by the arm and pulled, and there was a tense stretch of seconds where the outcome could have gone either direction, and then the tall one let himself be pulled, and the 4 of them moved back down the alley. 2 of them fast, and 2 of them trying not to look fast, and then they were gone. The bystanders at the far end didn't move. One of them still had their phone up. Ethan turned to the biker. He crouched down, not crowding the man, giving him room. "Can you get up?" he asked. The biker tested his weight, pushed against the wall behind him, and made it to one knee. Ethan offered his hand, and the biker took it a firm grip even now and got himself upright. He was a big man, 6 feet or better wide through the shoulders, with gray at his temples, and in the close-trimmed beard that covered a jaw built like a bank vault. He had the kind of hands that told you exactly what kind of life a person had lived, scarred, thick-knuckled, permanently stained, in the way that diesel and metal leave marks that soap never fully reaches. He stood there for a moment, steadying himself, and looked at Ethan. "What's your name, son?" "Ethan." "Ethan." The man said it like he was filing it somewhere. "Jack Mercer." He didn't extend a hand. Again, both of them had already done that, but there was something in the way he said his own name that carried weight. Like it meant something. Like he expected Ethan might recognize it and was already reading the fact that he didn't. "You need a hospital?" Ethan asked. "I need my phone," Jack said, and he bent carefully, retrieved it from the ground near his boot. The screen was cracked. He looked at it for a moment with an expression that was philosophical. "And maybe a minute. Take your time." Jack looked at him. Not the quick sizing up look of the first moment, but something slower, more deliberate. He was reading Ethan the way a man reads something he wants to understand, not just see. "You know who I ride with," Jack said. It wasn't a question. "I recognize the patches," Ethan said. "Most people," Jack said, "see those patches and walk the other direction." "Most people," Ethan said, "were filming." A beat. And then Jack Mercer made a sound that started in his chest and came out as something that wasn't quite a laugh, but was in the same family, rough, brief, and entirely real. He pressed the back of his hand against the cut on his eyebrow, looked at the blood, and shook his head slightly. "You work around here." "Castillo's, 2 blocks up Garfield." "Mechanic?" "Apprentice. Going on 2 years." Jack nodded slowly. He looked at the alley. He looked at the departed bystanders who had finally dispersed now that the event was over. He looked at Ethan. "You should have kept walking," he said. "Probably," Ethan said, "but you didn't." "No." Jack studied him for another moment. "All right," he said finally, and the word had a finality to it that Ethan couldn't entirely parse, like a door closing on one room and opening on another. "Go home, Ethan." Ethan went home. He didn't tell anyone. That wasn't a deliberate decision, it was just how he was wired. He got home, checked on his mother, heated up the leftover rice and chicken that he found in a pot on the stove with a post-it that said, "Eat this," in his mother's handwriting, and went to sleep. His mother, Linda Walker, 52 years old and 8 months into a lupus diagnosis that had been a long time coming and was still taking its time, being fully understood, was awake when he came in. He could tell by the way the light under her door was still on and by the specific silence that wasn't sleep, but was a person trying to give another person room. He knocked twice, which was their signal. "Come in, baby." She was propped up against her pillows with a library book open on her lap, which meant she'd been reading, or trying to. The reading glasses were on, which meant she'd actually gotten some pages in before her eyes had gotten tired. Progress. "Late one," she said. "Alternator job, came in at 5, he said. Couldn't leave Ramon with it." She looked at him with the particular attention that mothers develop over years of watching a child's face for what the child isn't saying. "You eat." "About to." "Rice is on the stove." "I saw it." She nodded. Then, because she knew him, "Everything okay?" "Everything's fine, Mom." She accepted that. Not because she fully believed it, but because she understood that he would say so and that he had generally earned the right to be taken at his word. He kissed her forehead. "Go to sleep." "I sleep fine," she said, which was not accurate. And they both knew it, but it was the answer she decided to give, and they had both agreed without discussing it that some things didn't need to be contested. He was back at the shop by 6:30 the next morning. Castillo's Auto and Cycle occupied a double-wide bay on the corner of Garfield and 2nd, and it had been there in various states of controlled chaos for 22 years. Ramon Castillo was 58, built like someone had compressed a larger man, and had the mustache of a man who had made peace with himself sometime in his late 30s and hadn't revisited the question since. He ran the shop with the organized efficiency of someone who understood that organized efficiency was the only thing standing between a small business and a slow disaster. He was already under a pickup truck when Ethan arrived, which meant he'd been there since 6 at the latest. "Morning, Kisinye," Ethan said. "The alternator's on the bench," Ramon said from somewhere beneath the truck. "Finish it before 9, the guy's coming to pick it up." On it. He was 3 bolts into the job when Ramon rolled out from under the truck and stood up and looked at him with the expression of a man processing something he'd seen recently and wasn't sure what to do with. "You're on the internet," Ramon said. Ethan looked up. "What?" Ramon had his phone in his hand. He turned it so Ethan could see the screen. It was a video. Shaky shot from the far end of the alley, the image grainy and underlit and slightly blurred from zooming, but recognizable. The red circle of a trending indicator in the corner. The view count was at the bottom. Ethan read the number. He read it again to make sure. "When did that go up?" he said. "Sometime last night. It's got hashtags. People are sharing it." Ramon tilted his head, watching Ethan's face. "That's you." It was. "Yeah," Ethan said. "The big guy on the ground, that's..." He told me his name was Jack Mercer. Ramon was quiet for a moment, which was unusual for Ramon, who was typically not a quiet man. Jack Mercer, he said carefully, like each word was a thing he was setting down gently. Ethan, Jack Mercer is the chapter president of the Arizona Hells Angels. Ethan looked at the video again, at the view count, at the red trending indicator. I know, he said. You knew last night. I recognize the patches. Ramon stared at him. And you still... He was on the ground, Ethan said, and they were kicking him. Ramon put his phone in his pocket. He looked at Ethan for a long moment with an expression that was doing several things at once, exasperation and admiration, and something that looked a lot like worry. Then he picked up a wrench, which was Ramon's solution to most problems he couldn't immediately solve, and pointed it at the alternator on the workbench. Finish the job, he said. By noon, the video had 400,000 views. Ethan knew this because 3 separate customers mentioned it while he was working, and because his own phone, which he kept face down on the workbench while he was on jobs, had been vibrating with intermittent regularity since around 9 a.m. He didn't check it during work hours. Ramon had a rule about phones during jobs, and Ethan agreed with the rule. He checked it on his lunch break sitting on the step outside the back door with a sandwich he'd packed that morning and a bottle of water from the shop fridge. 47 text messages, 16 missed calls from numbers he didn't recognize, a voicemail from his cousin Marcus in Tucson that he would listen to later, 2 messages from people he knew at school, both variations of "Dude, you're famous." He ate a sandwich. He put the phone back in his pocket. He went back inside. "You're not even going to look at it," said Devin, Ramon's other apprentice, 17 scrawny, too smart for his own comfort and constitutionally incapable of letting things go. Devin had been refreshing the video's view count on his phone all morning like it was a stock he'd invested in. "I looked at it," Ethan said. "It's at 600,000. 600. Devin, people are calling you a hero. I need you to hand me the half-inch socket." Devin handed it over but didn't stop talking. "There's this one guy on Twitter, he's got like 2 million followers, and he posted the video and said, 'Devin, said you were the last real American.' Devin." Ethan looked up from the engine. "The Corolla in Bay 2 needs an oil change. Can you start the drain?" Devin deflated with a particular dramatic flair of someone who felt that the world was failing to properly appreciate a significant moment. But he went. Ramon appeared at Ethan's elbow. He had that look again. "There's a reporter outside," he said quietly. Ethan didn't look up. "Can you tell them I'm not available?" "I already did." She left her card. "Throw it away." "Ethan," Ramon's voice was different now, lower, more deliberate. "This is going to get bigger before it gets smaller. You understand that?" Ethan set down the socket wrench and straightened up. He thought about his mother at home, about her medication costs, about the stack of bills in the kitchen drawer that he'd been working through at roughly the rate they came in, which was not a ratio that left much margin. He thought about the biker's face in the alley, the weight of the grip when he'd helped the man up. He thought about the 4 who'd retreated, about the people who'd filmed without moving. "Yeah," he said, "I understand that. So what are you going to do?" "Same thing I was doing this morning," Ethan said, and picked up the socket wrench. What he didn't know, what he had no way of knowing yet, was that 30 miles away in a building that looked like nothing from the outside and contained considerably more than nothing on the inside, a man with a freshly bandaged eyebrow was sitting at a table with 3 other men, and they were watching the same video Ethan had seen on Ramon's phone, and the conversation happening around that table was one that would take days to reach Ethan Walker, but would when it did change every calculation he'd ever made about his life. "Run it again," Jack Mercer said. The man across from him ran it again. They all watched in silence. The 6 seconds. The clean, controlled movement. The step back afterward, hands visible, tire iron low. The voice that didn't shake. The way Ethan had crouched down to the biker's level afterward, giving the man room, not crowding him. "He didn't know who you were before he stepped in," said the man to Jack's left. His name was Danny Ruiz, and he was the chapter's sergeant-at-arms, and he asked questions for a living. "Right. He knew the patches," Jack said, "didn't know my name. So he thought he was stepping in for some random injured biker." "That's right." Danny sat back. "How old?" Said 18. "Mechanic. Apprentice. Castillo's on Garfield." Jack paused. "Look up Castillo's." The third man at the table, whose name was Pete, and who handled things that didn't have official titles, typed something on his laptop. Small operation, clean reputation, been there 22 years. He scrolled. Ramon Castillo owner, no record, business license current, sales taxes filed. Another pause. The kid's on the payroll. Has been for about 2 years, no formal credentials yet, but Pete looked up. He's been working full-time hours on a part-time wage for the last 7 months. Jack looked at the paused frame of the video. Find out why, he said. The answer took less than a day to come back. His mother, the medical costs, the fact that Ethan had voluntarily reduced his own hours on paper so that Castillo wouldn't feel the pressure of carrying him full-time while the shop was slow but had kept showing up full-time anyway. The fact that he turned down overtime pay during the last 2 months in a row because the shop's margin had been thin and he didn't want to put Ramon in a difficult position. The fact that 2 weeks before the video, a woman 2 doors down from his house had been struggling to get her groceries out of her car. Arthritic hands, heavy bags, and Ethan had been across the street and had come over without being asked. Carried everything to her kitchen and refused the $5 she tried to give him. The fact that on a Tuesday morning in March, a stray dog with a cut paw had been sitting on the median on Mesa Verde, and Ethan had been late for his shift, but had stopped anyway, wrapped the paw with the bandana from his back pocket, and driven the dog to the county shelter on his way in. The fact that these things were not performed, were not posted, were not mentioned to anyone. Jack Mercer sat with this information for a long time. He didn't do what he did last night for us, he finally said. Nobody at the table disagreed. He did it because a man was on the ground, Jack said, and that was enough for him. The room was quiet. Find out what he needs, Jack said. That was Wednesday evening. By Thursday afternoon, the video had crossed 2 million views. By Thursday night, Ethan had stopped answering the door because twice in one evening was enough. And by Friday morning, he had asked Devin to tell anyone who called the shop that he was unavailable, and Devin had complied with this instruction with the wounded air of someone who felt that fame was being wasted on a person constitutionally incapable of appreciating it. And Ethan, who had not told his mother about any of it, not the video, not the view count, not the reporters, not the feel of Jack Mercer's grip in the dark of that alley, came home Friday evening to find his mother sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open and her reading glasses on. And on the screen was the video, paused on the frame where Ethan was walking forward with the tire iron low at his side. She looked up at him. He put his keys on the counter. Mom, sit down, she said. He sat down. Linda Walker looked at her son with the full force of an attention that had been watching him his entire life, that knew every variation of his silences, that had been tracking the weight he carried on those narrow shoulders since he was old enough to carry any. Tell me what happened, she said. So he told her. All of it. From the sound in the alley to the way Jack Mercer had looked at him when he said his name. He told it plainly without decoration, the same way he did most things, and she listened without interrupting, which told him she'd already seen enough of the video buzz to have the shape of it. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Were you scared? She asked. A little, he said, after. She nodded. That was the honest answer, and she knew it. The man on the ground, she said. Jack. Yes. You helped him because he needed it. Yes. She closed the laptop. She took off her reading glasses. She looked at her son in the way that mothers look at children when the looking means something more than just seeing. I raised you right, she said. It wasn't a question, and it wasn't exactly a compliment. It was a statement of fact delivered with the particular economy of a woman who had spent years making things work on not enough and had learned the precision of getting the most possible meaning out of the fewest possible words. Ethan didn't say anything, but something shifted in his face and she saw it, and that was enough. She reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. Her fingers were thinner than they'd been a year ago. He noticed that every time. He didn't say anything about it ever, and neither did she, and that too was an agreement they'd made without making it. 2 million people watched you be yourself, she said. That's not nothing, baby. Outside, a car passed on Pinon Street. The refrigerator hummed. The evening light came through the window at a long angle and put everything in amber, and for a moment the kitchen felt like the whole world quiet and specific and entirely real. Ethan turned his hand over under his mother's and held on. He didn't know what was coming. He didn't know that 30 miles away, a man with a bandaged eyebrow had just made a phone call that would set 300 motorcycles moving toward Kingman. He didn't know that by this time tomorrow, nothing about his ordinary life would look the same. He just sat at his mother's kitchen table and held her hand while the phone in his pocket continued quietly and persistently to tell him that the world had found him. He was back at the shop by 6:30 Saturday morning. Same as always, same boots, same burn mark on the sleeve, same 40-minute walk because the alternator part still hadn't arrived. The difference was that this time 3 people honked at him on Garfield, and one of them rolled down their window and yelled something that included the word hero, and Ethan kept walking because there was nothing useful to do with that information. Devin was already at the shop when he arrived, which was unusual enough that Ethan stopped in the doorway and looked at him. "You're early," Ethan said. "5 million, Devin said. Ethan walked past him to the workbench. 5 million views, Ethan. Since last night. It jumped from 2 to 5 while I was sleeping. Do you understand what that means?" "It means people have too much time in the morning," Ethan said, and reached for the parts manifest. Devin made a sound like a man being slowly deflated. "You are genuinely the most frustrating person I have ever met in my life." "Good morning, Devin." Ramon came out from the back office with his coffee mug and his reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, which meant he'd been in early doing paperwork, which meant something was bothering him. He looked at Ethan, he looked at Devin, he closed the office door behind him. "Sit down for a second," he said. "I've got the brake job in Bay 1. "It'll wait 60 seconds. Ramon set his coffee down. "I had a call last night." Ethan waited. "From a man who said his name was Pete. Didn't give a last name. Said he was reaching out on behalf of some people who wanted to verify some things about you." Ramon picked up the mug again, turned it in his hands. "He asked how long you'd been with me, what kind of worker you were, whether you had family." The shop was quiet except for the compressor cycling on in the back. "What did you tell him?" Ethan said. "The truth," Ramon said, "that you've been here since you were 16, that you're the most reliable person in this building, including me, that your mother is sick, and you've been carrying that quietly for almost a year." He set the mug down. He thanked me very politely, and then he said, and I'm quoting this, "That confirms what we expected." "What does that mean?" Devin said. Ramon looked at Ethan. "I think you know who called." Ethan thought about Jack Mercer's voice in the alley. That confirms what we expected. He thought about the way the man had said his name, filing it, weighing it. He thought about the patches on that vest, thick and organized, built up over years. "Yeah," Ethan said. "I think I do." "You're not worried," Ramon said. "Should I be?" Ramon studied him. "Most people would be." "I didn't do anything wrong." "No," Ramon said. "You didn't." He picked up his coffee again. "Brake jobs in Bay 1. Ethan went to Bay 1. He worked for 3 hours straight without stopping, which was how he managed most things that required managing through the particular mercy of physical work, which has the decency to occupy enough of your mind that the rest of it can't run unsupervised. The brake job, then a tire rotation on a minivan, then helping Devin diagnose a rough idle on a Silverado that turned out to be a vacuum leak so elementary that Devin spent 5 minutes afterward expressing feelings about his own diagnostic skills that didn't require repeating. At 10:15, a woman came into the shop. She was maybe 30, with a press badge clipped to her jacket and the specific, efficient energy of someone who had learned to move fast in spaces where she wasn't entirely welcome. She looked at Ramon, who was at the counter, and said she was from the Arizona Republic, and she was working on a piece about Ethan Walker, and she would love 5 minutes. Ramon said he's not available. She said she understood and left her card, and then, because she was good at her job, she paused at the door and said, "The video's been picked up by 3 national outlets this morning. This story is going to get told. It would be better if Ethan got to be part of how it's told." Ramon said, "I'll let him know." She left. Devin appeared at Ethan's elbow approximately 4 seconds later. "She's right, you know. If you don't talk, they'll just make stuff up." "Hand me the caliper," Ethan said. Devin. Devin handed him the caliper. "I'm just saying, you could at least—" "What I could do," Ethan said without heat still working, "is finish this job before lunch and start on the fuel pump in Bay 3. What I can't do is give an interview to a reporter about something I barely understand myself, so let's focus on what I can do." Devin was quiet for a moment. Then what don't you understand about it? Ethan didn't answer right away. He was working fitting checking clearance, and the question sat there in the space between them while he did it. Why it matters so much to people, he finally said. I walk towards something instead of away from it. That shouldn't be the thing people are losing their minds over. Devin leaned against the bay wall. He was quiet for a long time, which for Devin was a geological event. My uncle, Devin said, got jumped outside a bar in Flagstaff 2 years ago. 7 people standing there. Nobody moved. He picked at a paint chip on the wall. Not one person. Ethan stopped working. So, Devin said, I think that's why. The shop was quiet. Outside a truck went by on Garfield, and somewhere down the block a dog was making its opinion known about something. Ethan put down the caliper. He looked at Devin, who was 17 and scrawny and too smart, and who had never told him that story before. I'm sorry about your uncle, Ethan said. Devin shrugged the way people shrug about things that actually matter. He's okay. Got some stitches. He pushed off the wall. He still walks on the other side of the street when he passes that bar, though. He walked away to go check on the Silverado, and Ethan stood in Bay 1 for a moment longer than he needed to, holding the caliper. Then he went back to work. By 2 in the afternoon, the view count was at 9 million, and the Arizona Republic story had gone live without him. And it was, as these things go, reasonably accurate about the facts and considerably more poetic about the meaning than Ethan would have chosen to be. A local TV station ran a segment at the 4 o'clock news. By 6, 2 cable news programs had referenced the video in separate segments about bystander behavior. Ethan learned all of this from Devin, who provided updates with the dedication of a man running mission control and the selective timing of someone who had figured out that the best moment to deliver information to Ethan Walker was when Ethan Walker had both hands occupied and therefore couldn't walk away. CNN, Devin said, appearing at Ethan's shoulder while he was torquing a lug nut. Devin, just saying, CNN. I heard you. You're not going to? No. Devin retreated, reappeared 6 minutes later. The reporter from the Republic wants a follow-up. Ramon has her card. If you say CNN again, I'm going to ask Ramon to move you to the oil change bay for the rest of the week. Devin considered this. The oil change bay was arguably the least interesting place in the shop, a fact that both of them understood. Noted, Devin said, and went back to his Silverado. What Devin didn't tell him, because Devin didn't know, was that at approximately 3:40 p.m. while Ethan was finishing the fuel pump in bay, 3-4 men on motorcycles had ridden slowly down Garfield Street and stopped across from Castillo's. They hadn't come in. They hadn't approached. They had sat there for maybe 3 minutes, engines running, and then moved on. Ramon had seen them. He hadn't mentioned it. He'd gone to his office and made a phone call instead, and he'd kept his voice low enough that Devin, who was near the back, hadn't caught it. Ethan went home at 7. His mother was at the kitchen table again, but this time she wasn't alone. Mrs. Reyes from 2 doors down, the same woman with the arthritic hands and the groceries, though Ethan's mother didn't know that detail yet, was sitting across from her with a plate of something between them, and both of them looked up when Ethan came through the door with the particular expression of people who have been talking about the person who just walked in. Ethan, his mother said with a warmth that had an edge to it. Sandra brought tamales. They're from Tuesday, Mrs. Reyes said unapologetically. They're better on day 3. Thank you, Ethan said. I'll have some after I clean up. Sit, his mother said in the tone that was not a suggestion. He sat. Mrs. Reyes looked at him with the frank assessment of a woman who has outlived 3 things that should have broken her and has decided that directness is the only honest currency left. I saw the video, she said. Okay, Ethan said. You're a good boy, she said. You've always been a good boy. I told your mother that before any of this. She tapped the table once decisively, as if filing the statement. I want you to know that I know that. Thank you, Mrs. Reyes. Sandra? Sandra. She pushed the plate of tamales toward him. Now eat something. You look like you haven't sat down since Tuesday. He ate. The tamales were in fact better on day 3. The 3 of them sat at the kitchen table while the evening settled in, and his mother and Sandra talked the way women talk when they have known each other long enough to cover ground quickly, and Ethan sat in the middle of it and felt for the first time since Friday night something in his shoulders released that he hadn't fully registered was clenched. He was on his second tamale when his mother said carefully, "A man called today." Ethan looked up. "While you were at work, he left a voicemail." She had her phone on the table. She pushed it toward him. "I didn't listen to it. I could see it was a voicemail. But I didn't listen." "What was the number?" "Arizona area code, unknown name." Ethan looked at the phone. He picked it up, found the voicemail, and played it. He held it to his ear so the other two couldn't hear, though Mrs. Reyes was making no effort to pretend she wasn't watching him with considerable interest. The voice was calm, measured with the particular quality of someone accustomed to being listened to without needing to raise their volume. It said, "Ethan, this is Jack Mercer. I don't imagine you expected to hear from me. I wanted to thank you properly, which I didn't get to do the other night. I also want to talk with you if you're willing, not immediately, when you're ready. My number's at the end of this message. I'd appreciate it if you'd call when you can." A pause. What you did mattered, not just to me. Ethan set the phone down on the table. His mother was watching him. She'd read his face the way she always did, the same way she'd been doing it since he was 4 years old and unable to hide anything from her. "The biker," she said. "Yeah. He wants to talk." "Yeah." She was quiet for a moment. Sandra Reyes had also gone quiet with the perceptiveness of a woman who understood when a room's temperature had changed. "What are you going to do?" his mother asked. Ethan looked at the phone. He thought about the alley, about the grip, about the way Jack Mercer had said "I know" with a weight that suggested the words came from somewhere deeper than that specific night. "Call him back," Ethan said. He didn't do it that night. He helped clear the table, walked Sandra home 2 doors. 30 seconds, she didn't need it, but accepted it without fuss, came back and did the dishes while his mother rested, and then sat at the kitchen table, alone with his phone for a while, not looking at the voicemail, not looking at the trending video, just sitting. He called at 9 the next morning, Sunday, from the step behind the shop where he ate his lunch, before Ramon arrived, before Devin arrived, before any of the machinery of the day had a chance to start up. It rang twice. "Ethan," Jack's voice, same as the voicemail. No surprise in it, like he'd been expecting the call at exactly this time. "Mr. Mercer." "Jack." A pause. "You called on a Sunday morning. You work today. We're closed Sundays. But you're at the shop. Had some things to check on." A sound on the other end that might have been appreciation. "How's your mother?" The question landed differently than Ethan expected. He hadn't told Jack about his mother, which meant Jack had found out some other way, which meant the call to Ramon had been more thorough than Ramon had let on, which meant several things were happening on tracks that he hadn't been watching. "She's managing," Ethan said. "How'd you know about her?" "I asked some questions," Jack said. "I want you to understand something, Ethan. When someone does what you did for one of mine, I pay attention. That's not a threat. It's just how I operate." "What did you find out?" "That you've been carrying a heavy load for a long time quietly without asking anyone for anything. That you work more hours than you get paid for. That your boss thinks you're the best person in his building." A pause. "And that you once stopped to wrap up a stray dog's paw when you were already late for work." Ethan was quiet. "That one's accurate," Jack said. "The bandana was already old," Ethan said. This time the sound was definitely something close to a laugh. Brief, real, the same quality as the one in the alley. "I'd like to meet with you," Jack said. "In person, nothing heavy, a conversation." "About what?" "About what you need," Jack said, "and about what we might be able to do about it." Ethan's hand tightened slightly on the phone. "I don't need anything." "Everybody needs something," Jack said, not unkindly. "That's not a weakness, that's just being alive." Another pause. "I'm not offering charity, Ethan. I want to make that clear up front. That's not what this would be." "Then what would it be?" "A conversation," Jack said again. "That's all. Whatever comes after that, we decide together." He waited. "Will you meet with me?" The compressor inside the shop kicked on and off. A bird landed on the dumpster at the edge of the parking lot, considered its options, and departed. Ethan thought about his mother's hands on the table, about Devin's uncle walking on the other side of the street, about the 9 million people who had watched a 6-second video and felt something shift in them that they hadn't expected to feel. He thought about Jack Mercer on the ground in that alley, blood on his jacket grip still firm. "When?" Ethan said. "I'll come to you," Jack said. "When you say." "Wednesday after 5. There's a diner on Mesa Verde Luz, you know it." "I'll find it." "I'll be there at 5:30. I'll be there at 5:30, Jack said. And then before hanging up, thank you, Ethan, for this and for the other night. The words were plain without performance. The kind of thank you that doesn't need decoration because it means exactly what it says. Ethan put the phone in his pocket and sat on the step for another minute, looking at the empty parking lot, feeling the particular weight of a decision that hadn't fully declared itself, yet only its outline, which was enough to know it was significant. He went inside and finished his checks and left before Ramon arrived. He was home by 9:45, and he made coffee, and he sat at the kitchen table where 3 days ago he'd held his mother's hand in the amber light, and he thought carefully and without hurry about what a man with iron in his name might want from an 18-year-old mechanic's apprentice who'd done nothing special except decide for 6 seconds not to look away. By the time his mother came down for breakfast, he had reached a conclusion that felt neither simple nor complicated, just true. He'd agreed to a conversation. He would go, he would listen, and he would decide what came after when he knew what came after. He wouldn't borrow tomorrow's trouble. His mother poured her coffee and looked at him across the kitchen. You called him, she said, this morning. And we're meeting Wednesday. She wrapped both hands around her mug. She looked at her son, at the set of his jaw, at the stillness in him that she had always known was not the stillness of someone who didn't feel things, but of someone who felt them deeply and had learned early that stillness was the way to stay upright while you did. You're not nervous, she said. A little, he said. Same answer as before. She nodded. That was the honest answer, and she still knew it. Good, she said. That means you're paying attention. She drank her coffee. He drank his. Outside Pinon Street was doing its ordinary Sunday morning things, a lawnmower somewhere, a kid on a bicycle, a sprinkler starting its arc, and inside the kitchen, the two of them sat in their accustomed quiet, which was the kind of quiet that isn't absence, but presence, every inch of it filled with the particular density of people who know each other well enough that words are optional. What neither of them knew on that quiet Sunday morning was that 70 miles to the north in a parking lot outside a chapter meeting hall, Jack Mercer was standing with Danny Ruiz and Pete and 6 other men, and the conversation happening in that parking lot was not about a diner meeting on Wednesday. It was about something considerably larger. Danny said, how many can we get? Jack said, how many do you think we need? Pete looked at his phone, looked up. Word's out to 3 other chapters already. They want in. Tell them Wednesday won't work, Jack said. We need more time to do it right. When Jack looked at the sky, the way men look at things they have already decided. Friday, he said. We do it Friday. All of them, Danny said. All of them, Jack said. Every rider who wants to come. Danny let that settle. That's going to make some noise. That's the point, Jack said. And 300 miles of Arizona road sat waiting between that parking lot and a small shop on the corner of Garfield and 2nd, and between that shop and a kitchen on Pinon Street, where an 18-year-old who had never asked for anything was drinking his Sunday morning coffee and thinking about a Wednesday meeting that would never happen because Friday was coming first and Friday would change everything. Monday passed the way Mondays do when something is coming that you can't see yet, with a deceptive normality that doesn't fool the part of you that's paying close attention. Ethan worked. He finished a transmission flush, helped Devin sort out a cooling system that had been leaking in the specific way that cooling systems leak when a previous mechanic has used the wrong sealant, and hoped nobody would notice, and replaced a serpentine belt on a Ford that had been making sounds its owner had been ignoring for what the belt itself suggested was somewhere between 3 and 4 months. Ramon watched him the way Ramon had been watching him since Saturday, not hovering, not pressing, just periodically present in his peripheral vision, with the specific attentiveness of a man who is keeping track without making a production of it. Ethan noticed and said nothing, because Ramon's version of caring had always expressed itself as watchfulness rather than words, and Ethan had learned early that the correct response to being looked after by Ramon Castillo was to let it happen without comment. At 3 in the afternoon, a woman came by the shop looking for a quote on a brake job, and while Ramon was walking her through the estimate at the counter, she said the way people say things they think are casual when they're actually testing something. Is this where that boy works? The one from the video? Ramon said. What can I tell you about the brakes? She got her estimate and left, and Devin materialized at Ethan's shoulder within 30 seconds. You heard that? I heard it, Ethan said. It's been 5 days and people are still, Devin. I know. Devin retreated half a step. I'm just saying it's not going away. It'll go away, Ethan said. Devin didn't argue, but his face did. Tuesday was quieter. 3 jobs, no reporters, no mysterious, slow-rolling motorcycles on Garfield, or none that anyone mentioned. Ethan called the diner on Mesa Verde and confirmed a table for Wednesday at 5:30. The woman who answered said, "Sure, honey," and asked if they needed a booth or a table, and he said a booth would be fine, and that was that. The most ordinary logistics imaginable wrapped around a meeting that felt anything but. He slept badly Tuesday night. Not dramatically, he wasn't lying awake manufacturing scenarios. He just woke twice at odd hours, and both times the thing that had woken him wasn't fear exactly, but something in the territory adjacent to it, the awareness of standing at the edge of something whose dimensions he couldn't yet measure. He lay in the dark both times and ran the facts he had, which were few, and reminded himself that a conversation was just a conversation and went back to sleep. Wednesday morning, he was at the shop by 6:20. He worked clean and fast through the morning, kept his phone in his pocket, and checked it only at breaks, and was about 40 minutes into a wheel bearing replacement on a Jeep when Ramon came into Bay 2 and stood at the entrance with his arms crossed and said, "You have a visitor." Ethan looked up. "Not a reporter," Ramon said, reading the look. "A man, big, gray beard, he's standing outside. Said he didn't want to intrude on your work." Ethan put down the socket wrench. Jack Mercer was standing on the sidewalk outside Castillo's with his hands in his jacket pockets and a quality of stillness that was different from Ethan's stillness, older, more settled, the kind that comes from having been tested repeatedly over decades and learning that movement for its own sake is waste. He was alone, no motorcycle visible. His jacket was the same leather vest from the alley, the patches organized and specific, but underneath it today, he had a plain dark flannel, and there was a fresh bandage, smaller now, healing at the edge of his left eyebrow. "Wednesday's not until 5:30, Ethan said. "I know," Jack said. "I wasn't going to come in. I just wanted to see the place." He looked at the shop with the frank assessment of a man who reads spaces through their details. The clean bay doors, the organized tool racks visible through the window, the decade-old but well-maintained equipment. "Ramon Castillo runs a good shop." "The best in Kingman," Ethan said without inflection, because it was simply true. Jack looked at him. "How long have you known him?" "He hired me at 16. My dad knew him years back." He paused. "My dad's gone. Ramon didn't have to take me on. He did anyway." Jack absorbed that. His expression didn't change dramatically, but something behind it did. The way the still water moves slightly when something shifts below the surface. "I'll be at Lou's at 5:30, he said, "but I wanted to see where you work first." He started to turn, then stopped. "One more thing, and then I'll leave you to it." He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a plain white business card, just a phone number, no name, no title, and held it out. "My personal cell, different from the number I left on your mother's voicemail. If anything happens between now and Friday that makes you uncomfortable, anyone comes to the shop, anyone approaches your mother, anything at all, you call that number, day or night." Ethan took the card. "What's happening Friday?" Jack looked at him with a steadiness that was almost its own kind of answer. "Come to dinner tonight and I'll tell you." He left. Ethan stood on the sidewalk with the card in his hand and watched a man the size of a good-sized piece of furniture walk away with the unhurried certainty of someone who has never needed to appear more than he was. Devin appeared at his elbow with the timing of a man who had absolutely been watching through the window. "Was that?" "Yes," Ethan said. "He's enormous." "Devin, what's happening Friday?" Ethan pocketed the card. "I don't know yet." He went back to the wheel bearing. But the question sat with him for the rest of the morning, turning over with the particular quality of things that feel significant before they've declared themselves. What's happening Friday? The way Jack had said it, not as a mystery to protect, but as a fact whose time hadn't arrived yet. By 4 o'clock, he'd changed his shirt in the shop bathroom, which was not a thing he typically did, and Ramon had noticed and said nothing, which was its own form of comment. He was at Lou's by 5:15. Jack arrived at 5:27, which told Ethan something about the man's relationship with punctuality. He was still alone. He folded himself into the booth across from Ethan with the careful movement of a large person in a small space, picked up the menu, looked at it briefly, and set it down. "You eat here a lot," he said. "Most Thursdays," Ethan said. "What's good?" "The meatloaf, the paneer." What kind of cherry? They make it here. Jack flagged down the waitress. Her name was Greta 60-something, 20 years at Lou's, immune to novelty of any kind, and ordered the meatloaf and a coffee, and Ethan ordered the same because he'd been planning to eat anyway, and because sometimes the simplest thing is the right thing. They talked through dinner the way men talk when they're being careful and honest, at the same time measured, attentive, no wasted motion. Jack asked him questions that weren't small talk, and Ethan answered them with the same directness, and somewhere between the meatloaf and the coffee refill, the formality of the thing dissolved without either of them deciding to dissolve it. Jack asked about the alternator on Ethan's truck. Ethan explained. Jack made a specific comment about the supplier that told Ethan he knew his way around an engine, which wasn't a surprise given the patches, but was still something to note. Jack asked about his mother's diagnosis. Ethan explained the lupus, the treatment plan, the cost of the biologics that the insurance covered partially, and he covered the rest of the way. She'd been managing some weeks better than others, the fatigue, the main obstacle, the inflammation, secondary to that. Jack listened like it cost him nothing to listen, which Ethan had noticed was rare. She raised you by herself, Jack said, since I was 11. Hard thing. She made it look easy, Ethan said. It wasn't. Jack was quiet for a moment. He turned his coffee mug in his hands the same way Ramon did when he was processing something. Ethan noted the similarity without comment. I have a daughter, Jack said with the particular specificity of someone accessing something real. She's 23, lives in Phoenix. She's a nurse. He paused. She calls me every Sunday without fail for the last 4 years. He set the mug down. I didn't earn that. I wasn't always what she needed me to be when she was young, but she calls anyway. He looked at Ethan. People like that, people who show up when they don't have to, they're the ones worth paying attention to. Ethan didn't say anything. He understood the geometry of what was being said, and he let it rest. What's Friday, he said. Jack looked at him across the table, and something in his face settled into the expression of a man who has made a decision and is now acting on it cleanly. We're coming to Kingman, he said. We, Ethan said. Riders from 4 chapters. Anyone who wanted to come. He paused. It's going to be a few hundred. Ethan was quiet for 3 seconds, which was approximately how long it took the number to fully arrive. A few hundred riders, he said. Yes. Coming here. To your shop, Friday morning. Ethan set down his fork. He looked at Jack Mercer across the red Formica table in Lou's Diner on Mesa Verde, while Greta refilled coffees 3 booths down, and someone's kid was making an argument about a milkshake flavor, and the jukebox in the corner was playing something that had been old when this diner opened. Why Pihayoya? Ethan said. Because what you did deserves a public answer, Jack said. Not a private thank you, a public one. He leaned forward slightly, forearms on the table. Ethan, I've been writing for 35 years. I've had people help me and not help me. And I know the difference between a person who acts because they want something and a person who acts because they can't not act. You are the second kind. Every single thing we found out about you confirms that. He paused. And you're 18 years old, which means whatever you're going to become, you haven't become it yet. That matters. Ethan absorbed this. He was aware of a specific feeling that was not comfortable, not quite embarrassment, and not quite fear, but something in the overlap between them. The feeling of being seen more clearly than you're accustomed to being seen. I'm a mechanic's apprentice, he said. I live on Pinon Street. I don't... He stopped, reconsidered. I don't know what a few hundred motorcycles in front of Castillo's accomplishes. It tells the town who you are, Jack said, and it tells you who you are. Sometimes a person needs the world to reflect something back at them before they can fully believe it themselves. Ethan was quiet. Does Ramon know, he said. I called him this afternoon, Jack said. He said, and I'm quoting, about damn time. Something moved across Ethan's face then fast, and he looked down at his coffee for a moment before he looked back up. My mother, he said. She's welcome, Jack said. If she's able to be there, she should be there. Ethan thought about his mother's hands around her coffee mug, about the way she'd said, I raised you right, not a compliment, a fact. About the 2 million people who had watched a video of her son and felt something they hadn't expected. Okay, he said. Okay, Jack said. He picked up his fork. Eat your pie. The cherry pie was as advertised, made on the premises. Ethan ate it. Jack ate his. Greta left the check and didn't hover because 20 years at Lou's teaches a person when to let a table breathe. When they left, Jack stopped on the sidewalk outside, and they stood in the evening air for a moment, and Jack put out his hand. Ethan shook it. The grip was the same as the alley firm present, no performance. "Thank you for the dinner," Jack said. "Thank you for the meatloaf recommendation," Ethan said. Jack's face did the thing again, the brief, real sound, mostly breath. "Friday," he said. "Friday," Ethan said. He watched the man walk away into the evening, and then he walked home, and he sat at the kitchen table and told his mother everything, and Linda Walker sat across from him and listened to every word with her hands flat on the table, and when he finished, she was quiet for so long that he started to wonder, and then she said, "How many riders?" He said, "A few hundred." She looked at the table. She looked at her hands. She looked at her son. "I'm going to need to figure out what to wear," she said. Ethan looked at her. Something in his chest did something complicated. "Mom," he said. "I'm serious," she said. And she was, but her eyes were doing the thing they did when she was holding more feeling than she was willing to put into words. A mother doesn't get a moment like this every day. She reached across and covered his hand. "I'm going to be there." "I'll walk you," he said. "You'll drive me," she said. "That truck of yours better be running by Friday." "The part came in this afternoon," he said. She nodded, satisfied the way she always was when logistics confirmed her expectations. "Good," she said. "Then we're set." Friday arrived the way significant days often do, looking exactly like any other morning. From the inside of it, the alarm and the coffee and the familiar small machinery of getting ready, all of it running on the surface while something much larger was gathering momentum in the background. Ethan had the truck running by 7, which was not a small thing, and which he attributed to getting to the shop early Thursday and finishing the installation by 8 p.m., with Devin handing him parts with the concentration of his surgical assistant. It wasn't a beautiful truck, and it would never be a beautiful truck, a 2003 F-150 with a passenger door that needed persuasion to fully close, and a radio stuck on a country station that Ethan had stopped fighting, but it ran, and on Friday morning that was enough. He picked his mother up at 8:30. She was waiting on the porch, and she had clearly been there for a while because she was wearing her good blue cardigan, and her hair was done, and she had the expression of someone who had made a decision about what this day was going to mean and had fully committed to it. He walked to the porch and offered his arm. She took it. "You're nervous," she said. "I keep telling you." "A little," she said. "I know, me too." They drove to the shop. Ramon was already there, standing outside in front of the bay doors, and he had Ethan noticed with a feeling he couldn't immediately name, changed his shirt. Ramon Castillo, who wore the same gray work shirts every day of his professional life, without variation, was wearing a clean white button-down with the sleeves rolled to the elbow. He looked at Ethan and raised his chin. "Part's running good," he said. "Smooth," Ethan said. Ramon nodded. He looked at Linda. "Mrs. Walker," he said with a formality that also wasn't typical, and which told Ethan something about what the morning meant to him. "Ramon," she said warmly, "thank you for everything you have done for him." Ramon waved that off the way he always did with things that were true and that he had no idea how to receive. "He does the work," he said, which was his version of "you're welcome." Devin arrived at 8:45, slightly breathless, with his hair actually combed, which was a first in Ethan's experience. They waited. At 9:03, Ethan heard it. It started as something you felt before you heard it, a frequency below, language below thought, something that went through the soles of your feet before it reached your ears. Then it was sound, growing the kind of sound that has mass to it, organized and approaching, with the controlled momentum of something that knows exactly where it's going. Devin said very quietly, "Oh my God." Ramon crossed his arms. His jaw was tight, his eyes forward. Linda Walker put her hand through Ethan's arm and held on. They came around the corner of Garfield in a formation that was so precise it stopped being accidental and became intention bikes, 2 abreast measured intervals. The whole column moving at the same speed with the coordination of something rehearsed, except this wasn't rehearsed. This was just what happened when a few hundred people shared a common purpose and a common understanding of how respect is demonstrated. One after another, then more still. People on the sidewalk had stopped. Completely. A woman with a stroller stood frozen at the corner. 2 men who had been arguing about something near the hardware store doorway had forgotten the argument entirely. Cars had pulled over without being asked because when something of this weight is moving through a space, the space reorganizes itself. The column turned onto Garfield and came toward Castillo's. Ethan stood on the sidewalk in front of the shop where he had worked for 2 years with his mother's hand through his arm, and he watched 300 motorcycles come down his street, and he felt something that he didn't have a word for. Not pride, not exactly, and not gratitude, not exactly, but something that combined elements of both and added something else, something that had to do with the specific shock of being witnessed. He had spent 2 years being precise and invisible, doing the work, not asking, not performing, looking after his mother and his boss and the occasional stray dog and the neighbor with the arthritic hands, not because anyone was watching, specifically because no one was watching. And now 300 people who understood something about loyalty and brotherhood and what it cost to act when action was uncomfortable had pointed themselves at this corner of Garfield Street and were showing him that they'd seen it anyway. The column slowed further, and then in a sequence that moved from the front backward like a wave, the engines cut, one by one, then faster. Then all at once, the silence was extraordinary. After all that sound, the silence had its own weight, its own presence filling the street and the spaces between buildings and the space in Ethan's chest where the sound had been a moment ago. 300 riders sat on their motorcycles in front of Castillo's Auto and Cycle on Garfield Street in Kingman, Arizona, and the street was completely, entirely, perfectly quiet. Devin made a sound that wasn't a word. Jack Mercer stepped off his bike at the front of the column and walked toward them. Behind him, Danny Ruiz and Pete and 6 other men that Ethan didn't know dismounted and followed. They stopped 10 feet away, and Jack looked at Ethan with the full weight of an attention that had been building since the moment in the alley, and Ethan looked back at him, and the morning held its breath. Jack said loudly enough to carry, "A few months ago, a man I know told me that the problem with the world isn't that people are bad. It's that people have learned to look away." He paused. "I've been riding 35 years. I've met men who looked away, and I've met men who didn't. I know the difference." He looked at Ethan. "This young man didn't look away. He didn't know who I was. He didn't know what we'd do to him. He just saw a man on the ground and he walked toward it." Another pause. "I want everyone on this street to understand something about Ethan Walker. What he did in that alley was 6 seconds long. But we've been watching him for 2 weeks, and what we found is that those 6 seconds were not an accident. They were the result of a life lived with a specific kind of character. Every day, without an audience, without recognition, without anyone watching." He turned slightly so his voice reached the people gathered on both sides of the street, the ones who had stopped and stayed, which was almost everyone within earshot. That is rarer than courage. That is who a person actually is. He turned back to Ethan. "We came to say we see you," he said. "All of us." Ethan stood on the sidewalk with his mother's hand through his arm and said nothing because there was nothing adequate to say, and Jack Mercer was a man who understood that and didn't require it. Behind Ethan, Ramon Castillo uncrossed his arms and put one hand briefly on Ethan's shoulder, one firm, brief pressure, and then removed it because that was Ramon and it was enough. Linda Walker's hand tightened on her son's arm. Ethan looked at the column, at the 300 faces looking back at him, at the street that had reorganized itself around a moment that nobody had planned and everyone somehow had needed. He thought about 6 seconds, about how much ground a life can cover in 6 seconds if the direction is right. He thought about Devin's uncle walking on the other side of the street. He thought about his mother in her good blue cardigan. He thought about the tire iron he'd been carrying for 3 blocks without thinking of it as anything in particular. He thought, this is not the end of something. This is the beginning. He wasn't wrong. The silence lasted maybe 30 seconds after Jack finished speaking, and then Garfield Street exhaled. Not all at once, gradually, the way a crowd rediscovers itself after something has moved through it. People started talking in low voices. Someone near the hardware store started clapping a single pair of hands, and then it spread down both sides of the street and in a wave that was genuine, rather than perform the kind of applause that comes from people who felt something and needed somewhere to put it. Ethan stood through it. He didn't look at his feet, and he didn't raise his hands, and he didn't do anything that would have looked like either false modesty or comfortable reception, because he was neither falsely modest nor comfortable. He stood, and he let the moment be what it was, and beside him, His mother made no effort to conceal the fact that she was crying, which Linda Walker almost never did in public, and which told Ethan more about the weight of the moment than anything else could have. Devin, who was 3 feet to Ethan's left, was also crying, but Devin would have cried at a particularly moving truck commercial, so that data point was less diagnostic. Ramon didn't cry. Ramon stood with his arms crossed and his jaw working slightly and his eyes fixed on the middle distance with the expression of a man engaged in an internal negotiation about whether he was going to permit himself to feel what he was feeling, and the negotiation appeared to be close. Jack Mercer walked the 10 feet between them and extended his hand again, and Ethan took it, and this time the grip stayed for a moment before releasing, and Jack said quietly just to him, "You all right?" "I don't know," Ethan said, which was the first fully unguarded thing he'd said out loud since the night in the alley, and it came out before he could revise it. Jack nodded like that was exactly the right answer. "Good," he said. "Hold on to that. You should feel this." He stepped back and turned to include Ramon, and he shook Ramon's hand too deliberately, directly, with a respect that was clear and unambiguous, and Ramon received it with a nod that said more than most people's speeches. Jack looked at Linda. He took off nothing. There was no hat to remove, but there was something in the way he faced her that had the quality of a hat being removed. "Mrs. Walker," he said, "your son is a remarkable young man. You built that." Linda Walker looked at this large, scarred, silver-haired man who ran a motorcycle chapter and who had ridden 35 years and who had walked out of a dark alley with her son's help, and she said, "I know," with a steadiness that made Jack Mercer, who was not easily moved, blink once slowly and nod. The riders began gradually to dismount and move in the loose, easy way of people who've been on bikes for a while and need to remember that their legs work. Some of them came forward to shake Ethan's hand. Not all 300, a handful, a dozen men, and a few women who approached with the direct economy of people who don't waste gestures, who shook his hand and said their piece and moved on. One man, 60-ish, with a white beard and hands that were missing the top joint of the left index finger, shook Ethan's hand and said, "I was in Vietnam. I've seen a lot of people freeze. You didn't freeze. That's everything." Then he let go and walked away before Ethan could respond. Devin materialized immediately. "Did he just—" "Yeah," Ethan said. "Wow," Devin said quietly, which was uncharacteristically restrained for Devin, and which suggested that even Devin's considerable reserves of verbal energy had been temporarily depleted by the morning. Jack came back to Ethan's side while the street was still populated, still buzzing, and he said, "There's something I'd like to discuss with you, not here. When you're ready, not today necessarily, but soon. Will you come to the Foundation building? It's 20 minutes outside town." "The Foundation," Ethan said. "The club runs a workforce development program, apprenticeships, some community support." He paused. "I want to show you what we do, and I want to make you a proposal." He looked at Ethan with the same direct reading he'd done since the alley, the one that went past surface and stayed longer than comfortable. No pressure, no obligation. You say no, nothing changes, but I think you should hear it. Ethan thought about what he'd said to Devin that morning 3 weeks ago. I don't know what a few hundred motorcycles in front of Castillo's accomplishes. He understood now, standing in the evidence of it, that he'd been wrong about what the question even was. "Tomorrow," he said, "after my shift." "I'll send you the address," Jack said. The riders began to move, not all at once, but in the natural way of a large gathering that has completed its purpose, gradually in clusters, with the unhurried momentum of people who arrived because they meant to and are leaving because they're done. Engines started, not the coordinated shutdown of the arrival, but individual starts, scattered, filling the air with a sound that was less statement and more conversation. Within 20 minutes, the street had returned to itself, changed and unchanged in the way that a room is different after something significant has happened in it, even after all the furniture is back in place. Ramon looked at Ethan. "You want to take the day?" "No," Ethan said. Ramon had known this would be the answer. He went inside. Devin followed, casting a last look over his shoulder at the now ordinary street. Ethan stayed outside for another moment with his mother. She had dried her eyes and regained the composure she always regained, because Linda Walker was not a woman who permitted extended vulnerability, only genuine moments of it, and she was done with the moment and back to herself. "That man," she said. "Jack, he's decent." "Yeah," Ethan said. "What does he want to discuss?" He said a proposal, work-related. He runs some kind of foundation. She was quiet, looking down the street where the last of the bikes had turned and disappeared. When you go talk to him, she said, go knowing what you need, not what you think you deserve, what you actually need. Those are different things. Ethan looked at her. Okay. And take Ramon, she said. Don't go alone. He hadn't thought of that. He thought of it now and recognized that it was exactly right. And that was one of the things about his mother, that he had been watching his whole life, the way the right thing from her arrived, not dressed up, but plain, and was more useful for being plain. Okay, he said again. She patted his arm. Good. Now go fix something. He went and fixed something. The foundation building was 22 minutes outside Kingman on a county road, and Ramon drove because his truck was newer and had a passenger door that opened on the first try, which was a quality Ethan appreciated more now that he'd spent 2 weeks with his own truck's door. Ramon drove the way he did most things efficiently, without commentary, with the occasional specific observation that was worth more than 5 minutes of other people's talking. Halfway there, Ramon said, you know what he's going to offer? Apprenticeship, Ethan said. He mentioned education support, and he said something about... He stopped. What? My mother. That night at Lou's, he asked about her diagnosis, specifically. Ramon was quiet for a moment. Medical support, he said. Maybe. Is that why you wanted me to come? Partly, Ethan said. And because you've been part of what he's recognizing. Whatever he's offering, you're part of why I'm the person he's offering it to. Ramon drove. He didn't say anything, but he put his hand briefly on the steering wheel in a way that tightened and released, which was his version of being affected by something. Don't accept anything tonight, Ramon said finally. I know. Listen, ask questions. Take the information home and sleep on it. I know, Ramon. And don't let them make it sound like you owe them anything for this. You don't owe them. What happened in the alley was Ramon. What? I know, Ethan said. I know all of this. Ramon glanced at him. Something on his face settled. Yeah, he said, you do. The foundation building was larger than Ethan expected and looked like it had started as something else, maybe a warehouse, maybe a machine shop, and been converted with the kind of practical, unglamorous renovation that prioritized function over appearance. A sign near the door read Mercer Foundation in plain letters, no ornamentation. Inside it smelled like machine oil and coffee and new lumber, a combination Ethan recognized as the smell of a place where actual work happened. Jack met them at the door. He shook Ramon's hand with the same directness he'd shown that morning, and Ramon gave him the same measuring look he gave every new thing, and some kind of male assessment passed between them in about 4 seconds that ended in what appeared to be mutual acceptance. Thanks for coming, Jack said. Both of you. He walked them through the space, and as they walked, he talked, but not the way a man talks who wants to impress you, the way a man talks who wants you to understand something accurately. The foundation ran 3 programs, a motorcycle restoration apprenticeship that doubled as a metalwork and fabrication training program, a GED, and community college liaison program for young people who had fallen out of the standard track, and what Jack called LUD, a network support system, which was his unadorned way of describing what was essentially a community safety net, legal support, medical referrals, job connections that the club had been building informally for years and had recently formalized. Ethan listened. He asked questions, technical ones about the training, practical ones about the timeline. One specific one when they were in the fabrication room, where 3 partly disassembled bikes sat on stands with tools laid out around them in the organized way that Ethan recognized as real work rather than display. How many apprentices complete the program, he said. Jack looked at him. Full completion, 2 years, all 3 components, about 60%. What happens to the other 40? Some leave because the commitment is harder than they expected. Some get opportunities during the program and take them. Some, he paused. Some come from situations that make finishing difficult. We work to remove those obstacles, but we don't always succeed. What's the biggest obstacle? Money, Jack said. Most of them are coming from households where an unpaid or low-paid training period is genuinely difficult. He looked at Ethan without looking away, which is why the program provides a training stipend, enough to cover basics, not enough to get comfortable. Ethan nodded. He looked at the bikes on the stands. What would my role be, he said. Trainee to start, master fabrication and restoration under our lead builder, a man named Kowalski, who has forgotten more about metalwork than most people learn in a lifetime. Parallel track, you'd finish your high school equivalency. I know you're a diploma short, and that closes doors you don't want closed. After year one, if you wanted community college coursework in mechanical engineering. We have a partnership with Mojave. Jack paused. After 2 years, if you've earned it a position as a junior instructor in the apprentice program. Ethan was quiet. He was doing math that had nothing to do with numbers. My mother, he said, we have a relationship with a specialist group in Phoenix, lupus management specifically. Our foundation covers what insurance doesn't for family members of program participants. Jack said it plainly without making it a gift. That's standard for anyone in the program, not something special for you. Ethan looked at him. It would be special for me. Yes, Jack said, I know. He didn't flinch from it. I won't pretend otherwise. But the program exists for everyone in it equally, and that's the principle. You're not getting something others don't. Ramon, who had been standing slightly behind and to the left, prisoned, attentive, saying nothing, spoke for the first time since they'd arrived. He said, what do you need from him? Do you? Jack looked at Ramon with what appeared to be appreciation for the precision of the question. Commitment, he said, Oyen, real commitment. This isn't a reward, it's a path, and paths require walking. 2 years of hard work, discipline, and honesty. If he shows up and does the work, everything I described is his. If he coasts, if he treats this as something he's owed, it ends. That's not a threat, it's how the program works for everyone. Ramon looked at Ethan. Ethan was looking at the bikes on the stands, at the tools laid out beside them in their organized rows, at the hands-wide space of the fabrication room where something could be built that didn't exist before you built it. He thought about what his mother had said. Go knowing what you need, not what you think you deserve, what you actually need. He needed his mother's medical support handled by people who knew what they were doing. He needed to stop being a diploma short in a world that used diplomas as gates. He needed the kind of training that Castillo's had started, and that Castillo's, through no fault of its own, couldn't complete the deeper technical knowledge, the fabrication skills, the structural understanding of how things were built from the ground up rather than repaired from the outside in. He also needed, and this was the one he'd been least willing to say out loud, even to himself, to be somewhere that expected something of him at the level of what he was actually capable of, not what he'd been available to do. Can I ask you something personal? Ethan said. Go ahead, Jack said. Why does it matter to you, specifically me? He held the question steady. You've got 60% completion rates with a whole program full of people who need this. Why come to Garfield Street with 300 riders and make this specific offer to me? Jack was quiet for a moment, not calculating, actually sitting with the question, giving it the weight it deserved. Because of the dog, he said. Ethan blinked. Pete told me about the barn, Jack said. The stray on Mesa Verde with the cut paw. You were late for work. You stopped. You gave your bandana. You drove the dog to the shelter and then went to work. He looked at Ethan. Nobody was filming. Nobody was going to make a video about it. Nobody was going to put it on the internet. He stopped. You couldn't not do it. Same as the alley. He crossed his arms. I've been looking for that my whole life. The person who does the right thing when there's no audience, no reward, no consequence for walking past. Because that person, when you give them resources and a platform, changes things. The person who performs goodness is a limited instrument. The person who lives it is something else. The fabrication room was quiet. The half-assembled bikes sat in their stands. Ramon was looking at the floor. Ethan said, I want to include Ramon in whatever this is. Jack looked at him. Not as a charity case, Ethan said immediately with a clarity that surprised even him. Ramon's shop is small because Ramon is honest, and this is a small town, and honest small shops run on thin margins. If there's a way that the Foundation's network can send work his way, restore bikes, specialty jobs, overflow from whatever you're doing, that's what I want. He took me on when he didn't have to. He taught me everything I know about the work. If I'm going forward, he comes forward too. That's my condition. The word condition landed in the room with a weight that everyone felt. Ethan had not planned to use that word. It was accurate, and accuracy sometimes arrives faster than planning. Jack looked at him for a long moment. Something in his face was doing several things, and the thing that won was something that looked like the particular satisfaction of a man whose assessment has been confirmed in a way he didn't expect. He looked at Ramon. He always liked this. Ramon's jaw worked. Pretty much, he said. Jack looked back at Ethan. I think we can work something out, he said. Referrals at minimum, potentially a formal partnership for restoration overflow. He paused. That would benefit us too, so it's not charity. Good, Ethan said. Then we're talking the same language. Ramon made a sound that was absolutely not a laugh, successfully suppressed, and looked at the ceiling. Jack extended his hand, not to close the deal. They both understood that tonight was the conversation and the decision would come after sleep and counsel, and the specific clarity that only arrives after you've had time to let something settle. The handshake was something else. It was acknowledgement. It was two people recognizing that they understood each other. Ethan took it. On the drive back, Ramon was quiet for a long time. The county road ran straight through desert that held its own particular darkness, and the truck's headlights made a tunnel through it that felt like the tunnel that forms around any decision you're moving toward. What are you thinking? Ramon said finally. I'm thinking I need to talk to my mother, Ethan said. After that, I'm thinking I want to say yes, Ethan said. But I want to say yes for the right reasons, not because 300 motorcycles showed up and I felt something. Ramon nodded. Good distinction. The medical piece, Ethan said. That's the hardest one to be objective about. Because you want it too much. Yeah. Then separate it, Ramon said. Pretend it's not part of the offer. Look at the rest of it, the training, the program, the path, and ask yourself if you'd take that on its own. If the answer is yes, then the medical piece is a bonus, not the reason. If the answer is no without it, then you're making a decision with the wrong engine driving. Ethan thought about the fabrication room, the tools in their Rose Kowalski, whose name he didn't know yet, but whose work he could already imagine. About the community college coursework, about 2 years of genuine, demanding, specific formation. Rather than the slow patient plateau he could feel coming at Castillo's. Not Ramon's fault, just the limit of what a small shop could teach. I'd take it without the medical piece, he said. Then you've got your answer, Ramon said. They drove the rest of the way in the kind of silence that isn't empty, and Ethan sat with his answer the whole way home, turning it over, checking its edges, looking for the part that was wishful thinking, and finding instead that it held under pressure, which was how he tested everything that mattered. His mother was awake when he got home. She was in the kitchen with her book and her reading glasses, the same posture as the first night, the night before the video, changed everything. The night that felt like several lifetimes ago, from where he was standing now. She looked up. Tell me, she said. He told her. All of it, the foundation, the fabrication room, the 60% completion rate, and the question he'd asked about the 40. The stipend, the college track, the medical support, which he named plainly, and watched her face when he did, and her face did something that she immediately controlled, which told him everything about what it meant to her. He told her about Ramon, about the condition he'd stated without planning to, and his mother's eyes went sharp and warm at the same time. You said condition, she said. It came out, he said. Good, Ishan, she said. It should have. He told her what Ramon had said about separating the medical piece from the decision, and she listened to that with the specific attention she gave to things that were exactly right. When he finished, she was quiet. She took off her reading glasses. She looked at her son in the kitchen light. What does your gut say, she said. Yes, he said. Not your heart, your gut. Same answer, he said. She put the glasses on the table. She picked up her book, then set it back down, which meant she wasn't actually finished. The man said it's not a reward, she said, that it requires discipline and humility and growth. Yeah. You're not afraid of that? No. I raised you not to be afraid of hard work, she said. But I want you to know something. She looked at him with a directness that had no softness in it, only love and precision. Hard work for its own sake is just exhaustion. Hard work towards something, a real something, with real structure and real people around you who know more than you do, that's what builds a life, she paused. This sounds like the second kind. Yeah, he said, it does. Then you know what to do, she said. He did. He called Jack the next morning before the shop opened, from the step where he always made the calls that mattered. 7:45. The desert air was still cool and the day hadn't committed to itself yet. Jack answered on the second ring. I want to accept, Ethan said, with the condition about Ramon's shop included. Already made the call to our logistics coordinator this morning. Jack said. First referral goes to Castillo's. Ethan was quiet for a second. You were expecting yes. I was hoping, Jack said. Different thing. When do I start? Monday, Jack said. 6 a.m. Kowalski doesn't negotiate on start times. 6 a.m.'s fine, Ethan said. One more thing, Jack said. There's a young man at the foundation right now. Devin's age, maybe younger. He came in last week. His name is Marcus. Different Marcus than your cousin, and he has been sleeping in his car for 3 months because his family situation is what it is. He's smart, he's capable, and he doesn't know it yet. I'd like you to meet him Monday. Ethan understood immediately what Jack was actually saying, which was not just there's a young man. It was, this is what you're part of now. People like him are why the work exists. I'll be there Monday, Ethan said. He stayed on the step for a few more minutes after hanging up, watching the street and the sky in the particular quality of a morning that knew it was carrying something significant without making a production of it. The tire iron was still in the shop hanging on the rack with all the other tools exactly where it belonged. He went inside and started work. Monday arrived the way commitments do, without ceremony, without softness, just the alarm and the dark and the specific weight of a first day that knows it's a first day. Ethan was up at 5. He did not need the alarm, but he'd set it anyway because that was how he handled things that mattered, with backups, with margin, with the understanding that wanting to be somewhere on time and actually being there on time are two different disciplines. He made coffee. He checked on his mother, who was still sleeping, which was good because she slept poorly and deeply, was rare, and he wasn't going to interrupt it. He left a note on the kitchen table that said, Day 1. Home by 6, E, and weighted it with her coffee mug so it wouldn't slide. He drove the F-150 out of Kingman in the early dark, the passenger door cooperating. For once, the radio doing its permanent country station thing that he'd stopped fighting. 22 minutes on the county road. He pulled into the foundation lot at 5:51, which gave him 9 minutes, which was right. One other vehicle was in the lot, a truck older and more deliberately maintained than his own, with a tool rack across the bed and a bumper sticker that had faded to illegibility, which somehow made it more authoritative. Ethan got out and stood in the cool morning air for a moment, and then the building's side door opened, and a man stood in it looking at him. Kowalski was 61 years old and built like something a foundry had produced on a particularly serious day. He had a white crew cut in a face that had been in a lot of weather and had opinions about all of it, and he was wearing a work apron over a flannel shirt and holding a coffee mug that he'd clearly already emptied twice. Walker, he said. Yes, sir, Ethan said. Kowalski looked at him for a long moment with the assessment of a craftsman examining material. Not hostile, precise. You're early, he said. Yes, sir. I'm not a sir, Kowalski said. I'm Walt. Sir is for people who need the distance. He stepped back from the door. Come in, there's coffee. Ethan went in. The fabrication room in the early morning was different from what it had been 2 days ago, with Jack and Ramon quieter, more specific. The overhead lights making the tools and the half-built bikes cast the particular shadows of things waiting to be worked. Kowalski walked him through the space with the economy of someone who had shown new people around this room many times and had reduced the tour to its essential elements. Rule 1, Kowalski said, stopping at the first workstation. You don't know what you don't know. That's not an insult. That's the starting condition for everybody who walks in here. The fastest way to get hurt or to ruin good material is to assume competence you haven't earned yet. So you watch before you do, you ask before you touch. And you tell me when you don't understand something, because I've been doing this for 40 years and I've had every question, and the only question I've lost patience for is the one that wasn't asked and turned into a mistake. Understood, Ethan said. Rule 2, Kowalski said, moving to the second station. This work is not about the bike. The bike is the result. The work is about attention, precision, and the willingness to do the same thing correctly 50 times until it's not a technique. Anymore, it's a reflex. You don't get to the reflex by skipping the repetitions. Okay, Ethan said. Kowalski looked at him sideways. You're not going to tell me you already know that. I know it from what I've done so far, Ethan said. I don't know it at the level you're describing. Kowalski made a sound that might have been the first version of approval. Good answer, he said. Rule 3, Bio. You're here because Jack thinks you have something worth developing. Jack's right about people more often than most, But my job is to find out what specifically you have and then build on that, not to confirm what Jack already decided. So come in here every day without the story. Forget the video, forget the 300 bikes. Come in here as a person who wants to learn to build something real. That's all I need from you. Ethan looked at him. That's exactly what I want to be, he said. Kowalski set down the empty mug. Then we'll get along fine, he said. Grab an apron. We're starting on the Henderson frame. The first week was the hardest thing Ethan had done since the first month at Castillo's, and the first month at Castillo's had been the hardest thing he'd done up to that point. Kowalski did not pace the instruction for comfort. He paced it for competence, which meant Ethan spent the first 3 days feeling consistently behind, consistently reaching for something just outside his grasp, and consistently aware that this feeling was the point rather than a problem to be solved. He went home every evening tired in a way that was different from shop tired, deeper, more specific, the fatigue of a mind being stretched alongside a body. His mother noticed. Thursday evening, he fell asleep on the couch at 7:30 with his work boots still on, and she took them off without waking him. And when he woke at 9, she was in the kitchen doing a quiet thing with tea and a crossword, and he sat up and looked at her, and she looked at him. Hard, she said. Yeah, he said. Good hard or bad hard. He thought about the Henderson frame, about the 3 times Kowalski had made him redo the same weld until the penetration was right about the moment late Thursday afternoon when he'd done it a 4th time, and Kowalski had looked at it for a long time and then said, "That's correct," and walked away, and how those 2 words had felt like something substantial. Good hard, he said. Then sleep more, she said. You can't build things on empty. He started sleeping more. At the end of week 1, Jack came to the foundation and found Ethan in the fabrication room at 6:15 in the evening, an hour after the official day had ended, working on a detail of the Henderson frame that Kowalski had not assigned, but that Ethan had decided needed attention. Kowalski was in the office doing paperwork and had not told Ethan to leave, which was Kowalski's way of granting permission without making a policy of it. Jack stood at the entrance and watched without announcing himself. Ethan became aware of him after maybe 2 minutes, looked up and said nothing, because there was nothing needed. Jack said, "How's Walt treating you?" "Fair," Ethan said. "Hard and fair." "That's all he knows how to do," Jack said. He looked at the work on the frame. "How's it feel, like I'm starting," Ethan said. "Not like I'm behind, starting." Jack absorbed the distinction. "That's where you want to be," he said. "I know," Ethan said, and went back to the work. Jack left without another word, and that too was a form of respect that Ethan was beginning to understand, the respect of not interrupting someone who was doing real work. Marcus arrived on the 3rd week. He was 17, and he had the specific thinness of someone who had been managing hunger alongside everything else, and he came through the foundation's front door on a Tuesday morning with a backpack over one shoulder and the careful watchfulness of a person who has learned that new places have expectations that aren't always stated and that failing to meet them has costs. His name was Marcus Webb, and he had been sleeping in a 2009 Civic with a cracked dashboard for 11 weeks, and he had come to the foundation because a caseworker had given him a card and told him it was worth a try, and he had tried everything else. Jack brought him to the fabrication room and introduced him to Kowalski, and then to Ethan, and the introduction was brief and functional, and then Jack left because Jack understood that the most useful thing he could do in that moment was be somewhere else. Kowalski said, "You know anything about engines?" Marcus said, "A little. My uncle had a Chevy." "What kind of little?" "I know what a carburetor does. I've changed oil. I've replaced a brake pad." Kowalski looked at him. "You changed oil and replaced a brake pad, and you told me that without dressing it up into something bigger than it is." "It's what I know," Marcus said. "Didn't seem right to pretend otherwise." Kowalski looked at Ethan. Ethan looked at the floor because he was smiling and didn't want it to be the first thing Marcus saw. "Good start," Kowalski said and handed Marcus an apron. Ethan watched Marcus that first day. The way a person watches someone navigating something, they remember navigating with the specific empathy of recent experience, the memory of what the disorientation felt like before it began to resolve. Marcus was careful and observant and asked only necessary questions, and by midday, he had figured out the rhythm of the room well enough to stop watching Ethan for cues and start watching the work itself, which told Ethan he was exactly the kind of person Jack had said he was. At lunch, they ate on the loading dock. Ethan's own unofficial habit that Marcus had followed without being told. To Marcus said, "You're the guy from the video." Ethan ate his sandwich. "Yeah, I watched it," Marcus said, "about 15 times. Okay. Not because of the fight part," Marcus said. He was looking at the back of the parking lot. "Because of the part after, when you helped the guy up." He paused. "Nobody was helping you up when you were down. You don't have the face of someone who's had it easy." Ethan looked at him. Marcus was 17 and had been sleeping in a car for 11 weeks and was eating a sandwich that the foundation had provided and was managing to be perceptive and careful and honest all at the same time. "No," Ethan said. "I haven't had it easy." "So why'd you stop?" "Because he was on the ground and I wasn't," Ethan said. "That was the whole reason." Marcus looked at him for a moment, then he went back to his sandwich. That was the end of it, and it was also the beginning of something, and both of them understood that without discussing it. Devin came to the foundation on a Saturday in week 4, not because anyone invited him, but because Devin, once he knew where something was happening, was constitutionally unable to stay away from it. He showed up at 10 in the morning with a bag of gas station donuts, and the expression of someone who had been thinking about this visit for several days and had decided the donuts would smooth the entry. They did not smooth the entry because Kowalski did not eat donuts and said so. And Devin stood in the fabrication room holding a bag of donuts with a particular expression of a plan that had not survived contact with reality. Ethan took one. Kowalski pretended not to notice. Devin stayed for 3 hours. He asked Kowalski 17 questions in the first 40 minutes, and Kowalski answered every one of them because they were, without exception, precise and relevant. And around question 12, Kowalski stopped what he was doing and looked at Devin with the kind of look he gave things that were more than they appeared. "How old are you?" Kowalski said. 17, Devin said. "You still at Castillo's?" "After school, 3 days a week." "You thinking about formal training?" Devin looked at Ethan, who gave him nothing because it wasn't his thing to give. Devin looked back at Kowalski. "I've been thinking about it a lot since Ethan started here," he said. "But I didn't want to ask anyone anything until I knew what there was to ask about." "Smart," Kowalski said. He looked at Devin for another moment. "Come back next Saturday. Bring different shoes." He looked at Devin's feet, which were wearing what appeared to be skate shoes. Steel toe. Devin looked like he'd been handed something he hadn't let himself want. "Okay," he said, carefully. "Yeah, okay." He left the donuts on the workbench. Kowalski ate one on the way to the office, his back to both of them, and neither Ethan nor Devin said anything about it. The first referral from the foundation to Castillo's came in week 3, a 1971 Sportster restoration that needed work. Kowalski had outsourced deliberately, both because it genuinely suited Castillo's and because Jack Mercer kept his word. The second came in week 5. By week 8, Ramon had hired a third part-time person to handle the overflow and was talking for the first time since Ethan had known him about expanding the bay. Ethan came in one Saturday and found Ramon standing in the expansion space with a tape measure, and the look on Ramon's face was something Ethan had never seen there before. Not contentment exactly, but the specific expression of a man looking at a future that he'd mostly stopped believing in and has just been given reason to revisit. Ramon saw him looking and lowered the tape measure. "The restoration work is steady," he said, which was his version of something is changing. "Yeah," Ethan said. "The Sportster owner referred 2 friends," Ramon said. "People who want specific work, not routine maintenance, actual restoration." He paused. "That's a different business, better margins, more skill required." "Devin's getting there," Ethan said. Ramon looked at him. "Devin told me about Kowalski." "Yeah. He came home from that Saturday with a different face," Ramon said. "I don't know how to explain it. Just different." Ethan did know how to explain it, but it wasn't something that translated well into language, so he didn't try. He knew it because he'd seen it in his own mirror around week 2, the face of someone who has found the level of difficulty that matches their actual capacity and is for the first time genuinely being used. His mother's first appointment with the Phoenix Specialist Group was in week 6. He drove her down on a Sunday, the two of them in the F-150, with the country station doing its permanent thing, and she sat in the passenger seat with her hands in her lap and looked out the window at the desert moving past and said very little, which meant she was feeling a great deal. Halfway down, she said, I spent 3 years not going to specialists because of what it would cost. Ethan kept his eyes on the road. 3 years, she said, watching the symptoms and managing what I could manage and not going because I was doing the math and the math never worked. She paused. The math works now. Yeah, he said. Because of you, she said. Because of a lot of things, he said, including you. She looked at him. Don't diminish it, she said. You walk towards something and now the math works. That's a straight line. He drove. The desert was enormous and quiet on both sides, and the sky was the particular blue of Arizona in early morning, and his mother put her hand briefly on his arm and then returned it to her lap, and that was the whole conversation, and it was complete. The specialist was thorough, direct, and genuinely knowledgeable in the specific way that specialization produces when it's paired with attention. Linda Walker sat in the appointment with the posture of someone absorbing important information with full intention to act on it, and she asked precise questions, and at the end the specialist said her management plan needed adjustment in 2 specific ways, and that with those adjustments, her quality of life over the next 5 years looked considerably more manageable than what she'd been navigating. In the parking lot after Linda stood beside the truck for a moment before getting in, and she tilted her face up and let the late morning sun hit it, and Ethan stood on the other side and watched her and said nothing. She lowered her face. She looked at her son. You know what I thought about in there, she said. What? That bandana, she said. The one you gave the dog. He looked at her. You gave away the last thing in your pocket, she said, for something that didn't have any way to pay you back. She opened the truck door. That's who you were before any of this. Everything that's happened since is just the world catching up to what you already were. She got in. He got in. He started the truck. The country station came on. You really need to fix that radio, she said. I keep meaning to, he said. She looked out the window. Something on her face was soft in a way it hadn't been in a long time. Yeah, Don't, she said. I've gotten used to it. He pulled out of the parking lot and pointed the truck north back toward Kingman, and the road ran straight ahead of them through country that had seen everything and kept going, and the music played its familiar unwanted songs, and Linda Walker rode beside her son with her hands in her lap and didn't close her eyes even though she was tired because she didn't want to miss any of it. Back at the foundation on Monday, something had shifted. Ethan felt it before he could name it, a change in the quality of the work, not in volume or pace, but in depth. He was 3 months in, and somewhere in the previous week, without announcing itself, the repetitions had crossed a threshold. The wells he'd done 50 times were no longer technique. They were reflex the way Kowalski had said they would be, and the space that freed up in his attention moved automatically to the next layer of complexity, the way good training is supposed to work and rarely does. Kowalski noticed. He stopped at Ethan's station on a Wednesday morning and looked at the work and was quiet for longer than usual, which was how Kowalski signaled that something was worth looking at. Tell me what you changed, he said. I stopped thinking about the process, Ethan said. I started thinking about the material. Kowalski looked at him. Say more. Before I was thinking about what I was doing to the metal. Now I'm thinking about what the metal needs. He paused. It sounds the same. It's not. Kowalski picked up the piece, turned it in his hand, set it down. That's the difference between a mechanic and a builder, he said. One of them fixes what's in front of them. The other one understands what the thing is trying to be and helps it get there. He walked away, and Ethan went back to work, and the morning went the way mornings go, when the work is real and the room is honest and everyone in it is exactly where they should be. Marcus had found his footing by month 2. The watchfulness was still there. It would be there for a long time. Maybe always the permanent alertness of someone who learned early that safety wasn't guaranteed, but underneath it, something had steadied. He ate more. The thinness was filling in. He had stopped parking the Civic at the foundation because the foundation had connected him with a housing resource in week 5, which was a room in a house with 2 other young men and a landlord who had worked with the foundation before and who asked only that rent be paid on time and quiet hours be respected. Marcus paid the rent on time. He respected quiet hours. He came to work every day. One afternoon in month 3, he stopped at Ethan's station and looked at the frame Ethan was working on and said, "Can I ask you something?" "Yeah," Ethan said. "Did you know it was going to turn into this?" Marcus said. "When you were in the alley, did you have any idea?" Ethan set down his tool. He thought about it honestly the way the question deserved. No, he said. I thought I was going to get a bad outcome, actually. 4 of them wanted me. He paused. I just couldn't go the other way. That's all it was. That's all it was, Marcus repeated like he was recording it somewhere internal. The thing I've learned, Ethan said, is that you don't act because you know what's going to happen. You act because of who you are. The outcome is separate. Marcus was quiet for a moment. My uncle, the one with the Chevy, he used to say that character is just the pattern of choices you make when nobody's looking. Your uncle sounds like a smart man, Ethan said. He's in Yuma, Marcus said. We don't talk much anymore. A pause. I've been thinking about calling him. Do that, Ethan said. Yeah, Marcus said. He looked at the frame. I think I will. He went back to his station. Ethan went back to his work. 6 months after the night in the alley, Jack called Ethan to a meeting that wasn't in the fabrication room, but in the Foundation's conference room, which was plain and functional and had a whiteboard on one wall with scheduling notes still on it from the previous week. Jack was there, and Danny and a woman named Reyes, no relation to Sandra from Pinone Street, who ran the Foundation's educational partnership with Mojave Community College. They sat down. Reyes opened a folder. Your GED results came back, she said. Ethan had taken the exam 3 weeks earlier on a Saturday morning at the testing center in Kingman, and he had prepared for it the way he prepared for things that mattered methodically without drama, working through the material on evenings and Sunday mornings with the same discipline he brought to everything else. He looked at the scores. He looked at them again. He said nothing for a moment. Math is perfect, Reyes said with the tone of someone reporting news they found genuinely satisfying. Reading and writing are both in the top percentile for the year. She paused. Ethan, you didn't just pass, you placed out of 2 introductory college courses. Jack was watching him with the particular attention he always had, the reading look, the one that went past surface. Ethan set the scores down. Okay, he said. Okay, Jack repeated. I want to start the college coursework in January, Ethan said. Mechanical Engineering Foundations, in the materials science class that Reyes mentioned in week 2. Reyes made a note. I'll get you enrolled this week. And Marcus, Ethan said, he's been working with Kowalski for 2 months, and he tested 3 grade levels above his last school placement. He should be in the GED prep group. He looked at Reyes. He's ready. He just doesn't know he's ready. Somebody needs to tell him. Reyes looked at Jack. Jack looked at Ethan. You could tell him, Jack said. I will, Ethan said, but it should also come from the program officially, not just from me. Reyes wrote something in her folder. I'll set up a session with Marcus this week, she said. Formal assessment program conversation. Official. Good, Ethan said. Jack leaned back in his chair. He looked at the young man across the table, 18 years old, going on something much older in the places that counted, with the expression of a man whose whole career has been built on reading people and who is reading one now and finding that everything continues to confirm. You know what Kowalski said to me last week, Jack said. What Ethan said. He said the Walker kid isn't going to need me much longer. Jack paused. From Walt Kowalski, that is a declaration of love. Ethan looked at the whiteboard behind Jack's head. He felt something move through him that was too large for the room, something that had been building for 6 months through every early morning and every redo and every evening on the loading dock, with a sandwich through his mother's face in the parking lot, with her eyes closed to the sun through Devin's shoes changing on a Saturday through Marcus, calling his uncle in Yuma from the Foundation's lobby one Tuesday afternoon while Ethan pretended not to hear. Tell him I said thank you, Ethan said. Tell him yourself, Jack said. You work in the same room. I know, Ethan said, but some things should be said out loud so there's no confusion about whether they were felt. Jack was quiet. Danny, who had been silent through the entire meeting and who had in 6 months said very little to Ethan directly, but who had been present at every significant moment, said he's right. Nobody disagreed. The meeting ended. Ethan walked back to the fabrication room where Kowalski was at his bench and Marcus was at his station, and the Henderson frame that had started this whole education was now complete, finished weeks ago, sitting in the Foundation's display space where Kowalski put the work he considered worth showing. Ethan put on his apron. He picked up his tools. He looked at the new frame on his bench, a 1968 panhead more complex than the Henderson, more demanding in every respect, and he felt the familiar orientation of beginning. which was not the disorientation it had been in week one, but something cleaner, Val, the clear-eyed recognition of what the work was going to ask of him, and the equally clear recognition that he had what it took to answer. Kowalski didn't look up from his bench. Good meeting, he said. Good meeting, Ethan said. GED results. Perfect on and top percentile on everything else. Kowalski was quiet for a moment. He was working precise, unhurried. Good one, he said. Now it doesn't matter anymore. Ethan looked at him. Results confirm what you already knew, Kowalski said. You don't need the paper to know who you are. You needed it so the world has the paperwork. He picked up a different tool. What matters is what you do next. Ethan turned to the panhead. He ran his hands along the frame the way Kowalski had taught him not to check it, but to understand it, to learn what it needed before he decided what to do. He thought about a dark alley, and a tire iron in 6 seconds. He thought about 300 engines cutting to silence on a street where people had stopped what they were doing to witness something they hadn't expected to need. He thought about his mother's hands on the kitchen table, thin and certain and warm. He thought about Marcus calling Yuma. He thought about Devin in steel-toed boots showing up on a Saturday with donuts and the right questions. He thought about what Jack had said that night at Lou's, the person who lives it is something else. He had been in a specific sense the same person all along. The boy who stopped for the dog, the son who did the dishes, the apprentice who stayed an extra hour, the 18-year-old who walked toward a sound in an alley that he could have walked away from. None of that had changed. What had changed was the size of the room around it. He picked up his tool. He went to work. And the panhead frame, cold and waiting and full of everything it was going to become, held still under his hands and let him begin. Some people spend their whole lives waiting for a moment that proves who they are. Ethan Walker had his moment in 6 seconds and spent every day after it proving the moment was never the exception. It was just him finally seen.